Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, your RPG treasure trove, here at our home in Valor Studios, where we are a TTRPG content creation community who love sharing our stories with the world. As I mentioned, I'm Ryan Howard, King of the Boneheads, and this is Rollin Bones, a tabletop role-playing game talk show where we like to bring on guests from the tabletop role-playing community and have conversations about their experiences and works. If you guys like what you're seeing tonight, definitely hit the subscribe button, especially if you're a Twitch Prime member. We would greatly appreciate the support. And you can find out more information about Valor Studios at valorstudios.com. You can also follow the link, which will pop up here in chat, to join the Valor Studios Discord page. And if you've got a friend who wants to watch this show but couldn't necessarily make it out tonight, definitely visit the Valor Studios YouTube page, which you'll see a link for here in chat as well. And if you're watching us from YouTube, we definitely want to say thank you for supporting us in that way. And definitely come join us live on Monday nights at twitch.tv/Valor Studios to join in on the conversation live. And speaking of joining in on the conversation live, if you have a question for myself or our guest tonight, definitely feel free to drop it in the chat, and James will send it to us, and we will discuss what you guys want us to discuss. So without further ado, I want to introduce tonight's guest. This episode has been a long time coming. There's been a little bit of an eldritch curse put upon this interview, but we have finally spoken the right incantation and put the elder gods back in their pocket dimensions so we can finally have a conversation with the creator of WeirdFrontiers, a Dungeon Crawl Classics compatible Weird West RPG. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mr. David Baity. David, welcome to Rollin Bones.
Thanks for having me tonight, and I will definitely apologize again for the last two times we've tried to make this happen.
Oh, it's all good. It's all things like this happen. They happen way more often than anyone who has not ever produced a show like this. Understand that if you start out wanting to do content like this, wanting to stream a game, wanting to do a talk show, stuff like that is going to happen all the time. It doesn't matter how professional you are. Sometimes just the gremlins get in the system. But fortunately, we got that worked out.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, Ryan.
Oh, no problem at all. And it's great to talk to you because we have another connection here. We're both Carolina boys, which I am always down to support a fellow Carolinian, even if you are from South Carolina.
Yeah, well, just about an hour and a half away from each other, so just next time you're in town, let me know, and we'll grab a beer and throw some dice.
Absolutely. So what we do when we have someone on the show for the first time, David, we've got introductory questions that we like to ask everyone. So let's start at the beginning here. How did you get into role-playing games?
Geez, you guys were still floating around in the phlogiston when that happened. I think I was maybe 8 or 9, and an older kid in the neighborhood. With summers you're off from school and you're bored, and he brought this Dungeons and Dragons box game over, and we played that, man. It seemed like every day, and we didn't know what we were doing, but we were still having a good time. So from that point on, I think, honestly, I can't think of a time. I hate to say this, but I'm 52 years old. I can't think of a time past that, the time that I actually got into the Dungeons and Dragons, where I wasn't throwing dice. It went from, we kind of evolved or branched out, did a lot of Gamma World, and then jumped into Marvel superheroes and back to D&D, and then the old World of Darkness came out, and it was cool to be a goth. So it's kind of come full circle, but I've been at it for, I guess, a good 40 years, maybe more.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So you mentioned a lot of game systems there. What would you say your favorite game system that you've played in is, or what's your favorite game system right now if you can't pick from all the systems you've played in the past?
Well, I'd have to say DCC is my go-to now. And it's just because once you've got that system down, you can do so much with it. Obviously I've got a game coming out, but it's the community, which I know you're well aware of, is just such a amazing group of people. They're all creative and they all welcome you. And other than DCC though, if I had to scratch that one out of existence, I probably would go second edition Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe I wasn't really as big into Vampire. I did enjoy Werewolf, but Wraith was kind of my thing when it came out. And a lot of people are that's one of the more obscure old World of Darkness games, but I really enjoyed some of the systems that game has incorporated with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and let's not speak about scratching DCC from existence, because that's my favorite system, and I don't want to lose it.
No, we don't want to lose it. It's just, it's to me, it's even if you take the community away, the funny thing is when I first played DCC, I hated it. I mean, I hated that game, and I know that's kind of surprising, but we had played Pathfinder, and we were so used to that crunch, for like 2 years. We had a good campaign going, and a buddy and I had some characters that were kind of the Farford and Grey Mouser, kind of, we were having a great time. And then the dungeon master or I can't even remember what you call the Pathfinder judges, but he just decided he didn't want to do it anymore. He was tired of carrying around 32 splat books, and I get it, but he was like, let's try this game called DCC, and we played a funnel, and I had I got a character with a cow and a chicken, and I was like, what the hell's going on, and I had, as always is the case, the one character you want to survive is the first one to die in the funnel.
Yeah.
So I had this horribly statted up character, and I was just like, what do I do with this, and it didn't hit me. And it probably took a couple of months, and I don't know what made me do it, but I actually picked up the book and read through it, and I was just like, this light came down from the clouds, and this angelic Joseph Goodman floated down and sprinkled dust over me, and from that point on, I've been a happy cultist ever since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that's interesting about Dungeon Crawl Classics, and it's something that I talked about on Lou's podcast back in December. For anyone out there wanting to get into any DCC or MCC type game, they're basically the same game, just with different paint jobs. But don't start with a funnel. Play one adventure that's just a one shot, or 1 to 2 shots with first or second level characters. Then once you're hooked, do the funnel. Because if you go in there and you're like, we're creating characters, and I rolled a scribe, that's not what people come to the table for. So having that be your first experience with DCC, I can see why there were some initial hard feelings towards it.
That's a great idea too. I actually never thought about that. Running a solid first level adventure before you even try the funnel. But I mean, now I love funnels. Like, they're awesome. So it was just a shock to the system. I went from like an 8th level thief to just playing at 0 level.
Oh yeah.
Gong farmer.
Absolutely. Now, the next question that we have for you, if you had to describe your play style as both a GM and a player, how would you describe that?
As a GM, I try to keep it loose, but I do like to use the rules. Some judges with DCC, they're not big on the dice chain, and there's some of the rules that they don't hit on, I think, as much as they could. I do think that you could probably overuse certain rules for the game. There's a balance to keep, and I think that comes with experience and watching other judges, that have been at it for a while. Like if you go to a con and you play under Harley or Michael Curtis or any of the other DCC alumni, you'll always learn something. Like Brendan LaSalle is just like mind-blowing. His energy, I always accuse him of buying a big crack rock before each convention because he's just, I don't know how he does it, but he's just non-stop bubbling, bouncing around. But My play style, it's more about, it used to be, I think, way back when, I was very specific on character classes that I wanted to play, and now it's kind of fun just to play the last class that's left on the table at a con or something, and uh, give it a little bit of a story, not too much, because you don't want to be obnoxious and hog table time. But
Yep.
If you're saying play style, I try to find a good balance between getting into character and not being obnoxious about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, those of us who devote a lot of time to this hobby, make shows like this, put games out like you do, we have a lot of fond memories tied up with this. Otherwise, we wouldn't spend so much of our precious free time working on it. So if you had to pick a fondest RPG memory, what would that be?
I'm sorry, you just brought a flashback. This might not actually be something that garners me any fame, but I was playing sorry, I'm getting tickled because I'm having flashbacks, but I played in a game with Michael Curtis, and it was a Gamma World game, and Michael Curtis he pulls no punches, and I was playing a mutated gorilla, and it just so happened that there was a gentleman with his daughter playing, and she was probably, I'd say, maybe 10, maybe a little younger. But so we're all going through this, and she was, I hope this young lady isn't listening to this, she was the most obnoxious kid that you would ever have. Everything that you didn't want to happen, she just, so it was one of those things where I think everybody at the table was kind of ready for something to happen. But one of the mutations that the gorilla had was Death-Filled Generation. And if you're familiar with any of the old Gamma World abilities, it basically sucks hit points away from everything in the area. And so her character happened to be in an elevator going up at the time I used this power. And I didn't even think anything about it. And the fact that Curtis did just shows how maniacal and evil he really is in his heart. I'm just kidding. He's a great guy. But so we generate all the damage, and it just sucks the room. There's death all in the room. And then he looks at the little girl and he says, and you'll lose, I think it was like 40 something hit points. So it killed her. But the look on her face was just sheer shock. And then it was hatred. And I still have a picture of this girl sitting at the table with she's just glaring at me. So that's probably, I hate to say that, but that's probably one of my fondest memories, is making a young girl cry at a con. Maybe I should have dug for something else.
Oh, that kind of stuff is always fun too. When a player's giving you hell, and then just the perfect opportunity comes up where you can give them a taste of their own medicine. Those are always fun.
I will say this though, I didn't start going to cons. I used to do a lot of Warhammer 40K and Blood Bowl.
Oh yeah.
So I attended cons, but they were more for miniature games, tournaments, and I didn't attend a con until I started playing DCC, and I loved it so much that I actually wanted to run it right, if that makes sense. So I went to my first Gary Con back when it was still like tiny, and got to play with Curtis and Joe Bittman, and all these guys. And so all of my memories actually probably revolve around either a DCC author or an adventure, that was DCC, or in the later years MCC.
Gotcha.
So we actually have a question about cons, and the question was, what cons are David's favorite to visit? And hi everybody, I'm the producer of the show, and you'll see me pop in and out of chat every now and then. But yeah, what your favorite cons are to visit, Dave?
That's a good question. I would probably say Gary Con is the tops right now. Especially, it's getting more and more packed, I think, so it's losing a little bit of that charm. But for several years, it was the perfect size, and everybody that you wanted to hang out with was there. And it was, there was a heavy theme with DCC, so it was you had a blast with that. But I do also love North Texas Con. I think Ryan and I were discussing that a little earlier, just because it's a great little con, and you just can't go wrong with the food in Texas. It's just,
Yep.
always like come back 10 pounds heavier. But North Texas and Long Con, I love Long Con. Those guys are awesome, man. I think it's starting to actually get some steam under. It's getting bigger. Um, the other ones that I usually go to, I used to love Dragoncon, but I'll be honest with you, it's just gotten so packed, and the gaming seems to be dwindling a little bit for it. Maybe not dwindling, but it seems to be more of a party cosplay con now. So I just can't do the elbow to elbow crowd. So Gen Con, I love Gen Con. That dealer room's like a super Walmart, so it's hard not to get excited and go squee when you walk into the hall there. But other than those, I've done Mace, and Mace is a good little con. But oh, and Game Hall, shouldn't forget Game Hall. I love Game Hall as well. I think it feels like a Gary, but not in as a confined space. So I do like Game Hall as well. I'd like to try and hit some more this year. I know we talked about Total Con, I believe, wasn't it?
Yep.
Ryan, we're talking. I wouldn't mind trying that one and some of the others that everybody always talks so much about, especially with the DCC influence. You always want to go to a con where there's a lot of DCC and MCC and Weird Frontiers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, this next question here, this is our last of these introductory questions, and then we're gonna dig into some stuff with Weird Frontiers. And I'll tell you, the answer to this question can be as philosophical or as sophomoric as you want it to be. But David, if you could put anything on a t-shirt, what would it be?
Oh, you're gonna get me in trouble, man. Anything on a t-shirt, what would it be? God. It'd have to be something with a cat or a kitten, probably riding some mythical beast and charging into war. I don't take things too serious, so it would have to be something totally silly and off the wall. But anybody that knows me knows I'm kind of a cat guy, so I hope that gives you a little bit. That's kind of off the wall, man. I didn't expect that.
In my head, I'm picturing, just because of the subject matter of Weird Frontiers, I'm picturing like a giant Cthulhu and then a cat climbing on Cthulhu, just like on his shoulder, and Cthulhu's just like, stop, get down.
But he wouldn't do that because he loves the cat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We actually have a cool t-shirt coming out pretty soon. I don't know if you've seen the art for it or not, but yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. I'll think about that tonight when I go to bed. I'll shoot you a text or something.
Gotcha. Absolutely. Cool. So with the introductory questions out of the way, let's talk a little bit about Weird Frontiers and Weird West in general. And whenever I'm talking about the West or Western RPGs, the question that I have always is, what are your influences as far as like Western media? What are your favorite Western movies? What are your favorite Western RPGs? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'll say this: the Western genre was something that kind of crept up on me later in life. I wasn't really always into Western movies when I was younger. It was something that kind of, I don't know, just you catch that one really good one, and then you're like, hey, wait a minute, this is kind of cool. I want some more of this Clint Eastwood guy. So I would say that movie-wise, with the Weird West genre, it's a little harder to find something that you're really gonna not kind of want to turn off halfway through. You definitely will have more luck with just going with some of the I guess you'd call them straight meat and potato westerns. But I try and watch. The last one I watched that was really good was, and when I do watch them, something that I always try and do, whether it's a TV show or a movie, is I always try and put that weird West twist on it. Like, how can I make this into an adventure? And most times you could do that. I mean, it just takes a little bit of tweaking, but it's cool because they fuel the creative, energies that you have. I think it's kind of cool to come up with adventure ideas based on some of your favorite movies, like The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and Portend to Yuma. I mean, there's just so many good movies out there. If you've not been a lifelong Western guy, I mean, and you just kind of get into it, if Weird Frontiers or Deadlands or Down Darker Trails, if any of those games kind of spark that interest in you, you've got just a library of movies to fall upon to watch for inspiration. But I haven't watched a lot of movies lately. One of the last Westerns I did watch, which was I thought it was really good, and I can't think of the actor's name, but he was also in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs on Netflix. Did you guys, have you seen that? His vernacular is just, it's mind blowing, and I can't think of the character or the actor's name, but he was in a movie. I think it's called Old Henry. I can't remember the name of the movie now. It's not on Netflix. You'd have to rent it, but just a really cool slow burn of a Western. And that's kind of cool, and what's fun is when you watch a movie like that, where it just kind of sizzles and crackles all the way to the end, and then it just blows up in everybody's face.
Mm-hmm.
What's fun is trying to take that element and put that into an RPG if you can. If you can do that, and you kind of slow trickle it in until the fire just starts to, and you can tell you pull your party in or your players in, and then towards the end it just blows up in their faces, and you can tell they're so ready to have that last minute or that last end of the game duel or big fight. That's a lot of fun. Other influences, music, creating Weird Frontiers. I probably spent a good year and a half before it really got close to where we were going to do the Kickstarter on it. So just for I guess background noise, I would go through and just try and find dark country things that really build on the mood, and there's a ton of good material out there. I've got 2 playlists. I think one of them is Weird Frontiers. I think the other may be titled, I may have changed it when we rebranded the name of the game, but one of those set lists, I think, or track lists, it may be over like 12 hours of music. So I get my influences from that. Comics to a degree, there's some good comics. Jonah Hex is kind of hard to go wrong with.
Oh yeah.
So I'm all over the place, and the funny thing is there's such a I don't know, I'm trying to put it in good words, but there's so much material out there for people who want to run a Weird Frontiers game or any kind of Weird West game, that it's kind of hard to just kind of narrow it down to a few things, because we could really talk for hours, going from music to novels to comics to movies. I mean, it seems like there's an unending amount of material.
Mm-hmm. And chat's asking right now if you've seen the movie El Topo, the Jodorowsky movie.
Oh my God. Yes, I watched that movie. My barber, actually, he's a cool cat. He's a younger guy, and he was telling me him and his dad, they like to watch Western movies. So I did sit down and watch that movie, and I'm gonna tell you, man, it was just, that's about as weird as you can get with a movie. I don't know if you guys, have you seen it?
I've seen some of it. My familiarity with Jodorowsky is in that he tried to make a Dune movie. And so I've seen bits and pieces of El Topo just from researching his treatment for Dune, but I haven't sat down and watched the whole movie, but it looks like just the weirdest thing.
I would suggest a lot of psychotropic drugs if you're gonna watch that movie. I watched it sober, so that may be the issue. And, for its time, I mean, it's cool. It was some really good. The cinematography was awesome in it, but it's just weird. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah. Cool. So, the next question that I have for you, as far as just talking about influences, were you a big Boot Hill player?
No, and that's kind of what I've mentioned earlier with the last question. I didn't really get into Westerns as a kid. I was raised by my mom. She raised me by herself, so maybe if I had a dad around, not like not one of those things. But maybe if I'd had a dad around, the Western thing would have been there, but it wasn't. So I was always comics, superheroes, horror. sci-fi. So my interest in gaming kind of went that direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the whole Western thing, gaming, Deadlands, I would say I was probably well into my 40s before I even picked them up. And I feel bad because I think that, that if I had gotten into it earlier, it would have been, something I would have really enjoyed. But for some reason, it's just that genre that I never really, it's just one of those things. You play with groups of people growing up. Now obviously with the internet, you've got a lot more folks to branch out with. But growing up, you had your little neighborhood block of kids that played games, and that was just something that we never gave a try.
Yep, absolutely. Now, to kind of set the scene for people here, this is going to be asked as a two-part question. Firstly, can you give a little summary of what the world of Weird Frontiers is going to be like for players? And then, in addition to that, what are some of the things that you're most excited for players to experience when they first enter the world of Weird Frontiers?
Well, I definitely didn't want to put something out that felt too much like a game that was already out. So obviously Deadlands is, the king of the hill. Shane's an awesome guy. And I wanted to really try and push away from what he had done and make a game that basically people would sit down at the table and think, this is cool, this is different, I dig it. Not saying there's anything wrong with Deadlands, because there's not. But, why pick up a new game if you're already, into playing Deadlands and like it? In other words, I just wanted to do something that was, a little bit off the chain for it. So, when you play Weird Frontiers, I kind of want it to feel, I don't know, like a mule kick to the nards, if that makes sense. I want it to be in your face, like a spaghetti western. A lot of systems emphasize investigation and things like that, and that's definitely in Weird Frontiers. But it kind of takes a back seat, at least in my games it does. It takes a back seat to the blood and gore and the combat and just the nitty gritty of things. So I don't know. I try to make it feel like a roller coaster, if that makes sense. You're not going to have too many slow moments. There are some times where, obviously you need to investigate and ramble around town to figure out where you need to be. But from that point on, you need to go fill something up with lead. So, going to the second part of your question, I think that I feel like that the strongest element with Weird Frontiers, and I think anybody that's played it or read through it would probably agree, is the character classes. I tried really hard to come up with some classes. Anytime I've ever played a game, you asked me earlier on the show, things that I like to play, it's always been about character classes. That's what's always pulled me into a game and made me fall in love with the system. If you've got a class that you really dig and you can relate to, then you're probably gonna like that system. So the classes I feel like are the heart and soul of Weird Frontiers, and it's really hard to pinpoint one that I think is above them. I feel like they all fill a little bit of a niche for somebody. I'm not a steampunk kind of guy. That's not my thing. It never has been for some reason. But if you're a steampunk person, then there's a class in there. There's the Bedlamite. There's something, a little something for everybody, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Your mom gives me rain in chat here. By the way, thank you for the sub there. Your mom gives me rain. They're talking up the Hellbilly and how that's one of their favorite classes. My personal favorite, I do love a good gunslinger, and I think the one that you've put in the game is great. But my personal favorite is the Luchador. The Luchador is a fantastic addition to this weird world, although I do have to take you to task for one thing. As a gigantic wrestling fan, when it comes to the line for the Luchador, and we'll get into the line here in just a second, you had an opportunity that I think you partially took advantage of, but maybe should have taken more advantage of, where you called the person who walks the line a tweener. But I will point out that in Lucha Libre, a face is a Technico, and a heel is a Rudo, and I wish you would have used those terms, but not everyone is as huge a dork as I am, so...
I'll tell you this, that was That was something that I spoke. You may or may not know of a gentleman that's a pretty. He's an awesome guy in the DC's community named Michael Bolam, and he is like you, man. He loves wrestling. I mean, he eats, sleeps, and breathes it. And we had a lot of discussions, and he actually came up with some of the signature moves for the game. So
Oh yeah.
we had those discussions, and it kind of came down to space a little bit. But I will say that like Brendan LaSalle's adventure that is coming out actually has a Rudo in it. So I think that that's
Nice.
something that could be expanded on down the
Mhm.
road. I would love for somebody, just like with Goodman's games, you're welcome to take it and run with it and produce your own, adventure or whatever you want to do. And my hopes are that somebody will take something like maybe even make a luchador handbook or, I mean, I welcome that. So if Ryan, if you want to do me right, and you want to do some justice to the luchador, then you are welcome. But I will say this: uh, there will be an all luchador adventure at some point. I'm waiting for somebody to pitch it, and if they don't, then I'm going to go at it. And I guess I need to bend your ear on it since you are a self-confessed fan.
Yeah, I feel like you've just kind of laid down a gauntlet for me and challenged me to come up with some kind of like Dark Wrestling Federation type adventure for Weird Frontiers. So I'm gonna have to start looking into that.
Please do, and I mean that with sincerity. It would make me so happy.
Hmm. There's this crazy weird wrestling federation several years ago called Lucha Underground, where it was a lucha libre wrestling promotion, but there was all kinds of like weird story elements. It was a lot more cinematic than like a traditional wrestling show. It was weird and bizarre and semi-mystical, but it was also fantastic. So I'm gonna have to dig into some Lucha Underground and come back to you with that.
Someone has suggested that I watch that, and now that you've put it back to the front of my head, I'm going to definitely have to look at it too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Now, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there for a second, just thinking about luchadors. But yeah, some of there's a lot of great pieces of folklore and mysticism from like multiple different places that you've kind of pulled into this book. So for anyone out there wondering what a party could look like, you can have your traditional gunslinger with enchanted guns. You can have your luchador. You have the hellbilly, which is uh, essentially a barbarian who gets magic from drinking alcohol. But you also have kind of a Dia de los Muertos planeswalker type character as well, and all kinds of crazy stuff around that too. Talk a little bit about what you wanted to pull from as you were making this. Like, was it just you'd see cool pieces of art that had the Day of the Dead uh, makeup and stuff and want to incorporate that in the game? Where did all this come from, and how did it end up in Weird Frontiers?
I think, in all honesty, I feel like that we're all heavily influenced by things, especially as gamers, whether it's art or books, comics, things that we've already discussed to a large degree. So when it comes down to actually sitting down and trying to come up with some cool character concepts and classes, I think it would be wrong not to say that there's some heavy influences. Like with the Calavera, I think that's kind of where you're hitting on with the Planeswalker. I can tell you, just as a kid, I used to read a lot of horror, and there's a guy named Brian Lumley. He's still around, and he's done a lot of Cthulhu stuff, but one of the series of books that he wrote was called The Necroscope, and the main character in it is this British guy who could actually speak to the dead. And so the dead would they were very protective over him, and they loved him, and he would in his own ways try and help them out if they had some unfinished business. So that influence just kind of rolls into who doesn't like a sugar skull, or the sugar skull? So it just kind of rolls in. So I think that every class probably does have some, there are some influences that I've pulled from to And it may even be kind of an unconscious thing. You've got these things that are dear to you, memories, whether it be books or games. And so it's kind of hard not to draw from that, even if you're not doing it on purpose.
Yeah, and there's even the ability to play as kind of sort of an undead pseudo time traveler in the Sin Eater, which I
Yeah.
find very fascinating. The concept of playing like the ferryman between the world of the living and the dead, and that you could, like, I don't know, be a barbarian from Roman times who ended up in the Wild West.
Yeah, it's I'll just say this. I think I found a way to find everything that I actually found interesting growing up and putting a Western twist on it. Because yeah,
Yeah.
you would think, what the hell is this guy doing in here? But I think it fits pretty good because some of the backstory, there's this big week-long event called the 7 Days of Night, and a lot of bad stuff happens. But one of the things that happens through the course of these rituals that are being performed is the passage to go from life to death is blocked. So souls are kind of trapped in the spirit world, and it's starting to kind of build up in that old Ghostbusters, the thing that was happening, things were going crazy. So Charon, the first ferryman, he's like, hey, we got to do something about this. So he takes some of his ferrymen and sends them back up to the surface. And you like you said, you could be playing a Roman gladiator who's in the West now, and he still carries around one of his gladiatorial weapons. But I think it works. At least I hope it does.
Yeah, with all the strangeness that's inherent in a Weird West game, characters like that do. It seems like they might stand out a little bit, but they do tend to fit pretty well. So one of the best strengths of Weird Frontiers, like you mentioned, are the crazy variety of classes and all the cool things that each of these classes can do. So well done in that regard. Reading those classes was one of my favorite parts of reading the book itself.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I was reading a question. What was your question again? I'm sorry, Ryan.
Oh, just I was saying that even a character that's essentially a time displaced Roman, like we've been using, can fit in these Weird West settings just because of how weird everything already is.
Yeah,
And that
it ties in, and the way, I mean, I don't know, maybe I went too far with it, but my thoughts were, there was a time where, maybe Greek mythology, those gods were actually real, but we eventually evolved into where we're at right now. So what happened to all these gods? They lose their followers and worshipers, so they get a little weaker, but they're still out there somewhere. And with some of the story in the game, the backstory, if you want to use it, you can, or you don't have to if you don't want to, but is that the elder gods are trying to break free from these dimensional prisons that they were put into aeons ago. So these I guess you'd call them dead gods in a way. They realize what's going on, and hey, if these things get out, what's next? If they take Earth, where are they going next? Are they going to some of their their dimensions or whatnot? So the one element that I didn't play a lot on that I wanted to is the old, Thor's got him an avatar running around in the Weird West, and because ultimately this all comes to a head in one day, and everybody's got a role to play in it. So some of these deities are the more prominent ones in the game are Lady Luck and Lady Calamity. They've taken more of an active role in things, but as I guess the story evolves a little bit, there may be elements of that, or maybe even some demons come to Earth by way of Lucifer, who really doesn't take kindly to these elder things getting in between him and the big man at the end of the day. So it's just such a hodgepodge or melting pot of different ideas and stories. But I do think that, like you were saying, it seems to come together. I haven't had a moment yet where I've ran it at a con or, off books where someone's just looked at me and be like, what the hell are you doing? This makes no sense. Somehow or another, it seems to work.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Thor, and I'm going to put this idea in your head right now that I'm sure you've probably already thought of, but Mjolnir's a 6-gun.
Oh, yes. That's awesome. That's a great idea, man. I dig that.
Mjolnir is a 6-gun, a cult thunderer, if you will. You make it a cult frontier, and yeah,
You're throwing these ideas, man. You need to get on them. I hope you're writing these down.
I I am. I definitely am. But kind of switching tracks here, because this is a DCC compatible game. Uh, what were some of the challenges of taking the Dungeon Crawl Classics rule set and tweaking it to fit like a game that has essentially modern firearms with, you know, multiple shot guns and things like that? Just taking a fantasy rule set and kind of turning it into a Western,
Yeah.
or
No,
making it work with Western stuff. What was that like for you?
well, I think you got, and there and again, I didn't want to try and emulate something that was already out there, but I definitely did want you to sit down at the table if you're playing this game and think, oh, this kind of feels Westerny. There's some elements to it that really, I'm digging it. I'm feeling the vibes of it. The DCC system itself is what it is. It's a great system. It works well for fantasy. For a Weird West kind of thing, I think it needed a few tweaks. I don't necessarily think anything needed to be pulled away from it, but I did feel like that we needed to add a few things. So just through the years of play testing it, some of the things that we added were the gun deck. So basically, to better answer your question, there's probably 4 or 5 added mechanics. There's the gun deck, and that's kind of I don't know. There's a few folks that might not like that, and of course, you don't have to use it because you've got. I'm sure you're familiar with the Crawl fanzine. I can't remember what episode or what issue it is, but they go through firearms, and I didn't want to take when I did firearms for Weird Frontiers. I wanted to try at least to make it something different from anything else that was out there, whether you liked it or you didn't. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. You can plug something else in, and that's easy enough to do. But so I spent a lot of time with firearms, reading a lot of different games and seeing how they handled it, and trying to come up with something that I felt like fit the DCC crowd, if that makes sense. Kind of off. DCC is so gonzo and weird, and it can be so over the top sometimes. And if you've played a Weird Frontiers game, you know that firearms can definitely be wild and over the top, or they can blow up in your face pretty quick. So there's the firearms with the gun deck, and then of course, if you're dealing with a horror element in the Elder Gods, the whole Cthulhu mythos, you probably want to have some kind of sanity mechanic in there. So I tried to come up with something that was different, but also something that didn't weigh the game down to the point to where you're losing sanity points and pretty soon you're going to be an NPC. It's kind of a slow burn towards insanity with Weird Frontiers. And if you think about it, your character classes, they're kind of over the top and they've got a lot of their own power. So it doesn't make sense for them just to go start raving mad after a couple of adventures. So there's a pretty cool, I think it's called we call it grit checks, which is basically there's a combination. If you take the stats from DCC, you've got personality and you've got stamina. And my reasoning with that was, well, what is stress? Stress can affect you physically and, of course, mentally and emotionally. So we just took the stamina and the personality and added them together and divided to come up with grit points, which are just kind of a in-story marking of where your character is on, whether or not they're close to having a breakdown. If you fail a grit check, you lose a couple of points, and if you happen to go all the way to 0, it's no big deal, but you have kind of a minor breakdown, and at the end of the adventure, you go back up to your total -1 from where it was. So there's that slow burn. But other than the sanity and the gun deck, there's little rules, little mechanics like showdowns and things like that I think if you wanted to have them, you could throw them in. My goal with Weird Frontiers was to give you rules that you may or may not want. There's a few that I think really make the game what it is, but there's a lot of other mechanics and rules that you really don't have to use. But if you're like, man, I really wish there was rules for dynamite. What happens when you blow a building up? There's a quick little rule for that. There's rules for chasing. LaSalle actually, one of the better compliments I've gotten from a DCC alumni was he actually uses the chase rules from Weird Frontiers when in his DCC games now. So,
Sweet.
and there are a lot of mechanics that you could take that are in Weird Frontiers and you could port them into DCC. It'd be very easy to do that. So, I think we did a pretty good job with that. Some people think it's. I've seen some folks say that it's too crunchy, and I get that. It is. There are more mechanics coming from DCC to a Weird Frontiers game, but there are also mechanics that you don't really have to have. I mean, if you want to get rid of the gun deck and you just want to throw 20s, that's totally fine. But I feel like that if you ever use the gun deck, I mean, it adds that element, And then there's boons and hexes, the poker chips that we use. So the goal was to just try and come up with something to where if you're sitting around a table, you kind of helps you get into the, I don't know, the thought process of being in a Weird West game.
And one thing that I would put as a positive for the gun deck is this is a horror game to some extent, and there's nothing more horrifying than a Shoggoth comes bursting out of the saloon, you reach for your 6-shooter, you pull it out, you pull the trigger, and you misfire. That's horrifying. And the gun deck allows for that mechanic to be there.
Yeah, it does. And there's been some complaints about how it was a little stacked one way or the other, but again, there's a mechanic in the game for tuning your rig. So if you sit around and you clean your gun and you do a good number on it before you bed down for the night, then you can actually pull some of the bad cards out of the gun deck. So some folks may not be aware of some of these mechanics that are in there because they haven't got the meaty tome in their hands yet and they're just looking at the PDF. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's guns back in the day were not dependable, and that was a challenge in and of itself. I had a lot of conversations with some folks who know a lot more about guns than I do. And doing a lot of reading on myself, and back in the day, man, it took a long time to load a pistol. So how do you put that into an RPG where people aren't just kind of like, seriously, I've got to wait 10 rounds to load this pistol? So we tried to come up with some good mechanics that are realistic, but also not so much that it kind of weighs down the gameplay.
Absolutely. And chat raises a good question here as far as peripherals for this particular game. Has there been any talk or any movement on getting a Weird Frontier specific card deck for people to use?
There are definitely plans for that. I hate to. The Kickstarter, as anybody knows, is already late, but the book's like twice the size as it was supposed to be. So there is some, I guess some give for some take. But I would eventually like to do a themed deck of cards and some poker chips to use for boons and hexes. But until the fulfillment is done and all those products are in people's hands, I don't think that it would be right to jump onto something else like that. But yeah, to anybody that has those questions, I would love to put out Weird Frontiers Underoos and anything else that you guys want.
We'll put what I like to call the Miskatonic Kid here on a t-shirt and sell it to you.
A Miskatonic Kid, that's awesome.
But yeah, and again, I showed the canister here, but you do have these Xochi dice for the dice chain. Anyone unfamiliar with Dungeon Crawl Classics and the way that it works, you've got all the way from a D3 up to a D30. And there's all kinds of weird, funky dice in the middle. So when you're playing Dungeon Crawl Classics or Mutant Crawl Classics or Weird Frontiers, you need to break out the Xochi dice, and they are beautiful. They're amazing dice.
Yeah. Now, getting back to what we were saying, the dice actually was very lucky in that I know Tom with Impact Dice very well, and I had a certain amount of dice sets that I needed to sell to pay for the run that I did. So it was one of those things where you can't always order these dice. Tom only orders them like a few times through the year. So it was one of those things I had to get in on, or there was no guarantee it would happen. So I was lucky enough to get those made, and like you're saying, Ryan, I think they're really beautiful dice. So I'm happy with them, and I've sold enough sets now to where I've paid for what I've got. So they'll always, what I've got on hand is actually cool, because I'll have some for a while, hopefully.
Absolutely. Cool. So, obviously you mentioned priority one at this point is getting the physical book out. And I don't want to hold your feet to the fire or anything like that, but when are you expecting to have the physical book available for people who didn't back the Kickstarter to order?
Well, here's the thing. For starters, which I already mentioned to it, the book, I do have an actual copy of the book, which is pretty cool for those of you who haven't seen it. There's 2 editions. There's the limited that you just saw, and then this is the, wait a minute, there we go. Oh well, anyway. So I do have, one of the last things that happened, and this is all a new process for me. We were talking before the show, Ryan. Most folks start with an adventure or maybe a fanzine, and then for some reason I thought it would be smart to come out with a 900-page book. So this has been a learning process for me with a lot of speed bumps. But one of the last steps when you actually have books printed is they'll send you copies of the books that are actually, they're what you're going to get.
Yep.
Because at that point you've either got to say, hey, this isn't right, I need to change this, or you put the thumb on it, and then you hope for the best. So we're at that stage right now. I actually sent an email to my the printer today asking if there had been any change, and they didn't get back to me. But the last I was told, the books should be here sometime in April. So it may be a little sooner, it may be a little later, because they're coming from China, and with the world the way it is right now, you guys know that probably if you've bought a game or you've waited on the game, it's just gotten kind of crazy with the way things are going, the shortages and whatnot. But as far as being able to get a copy if you didn't back the Kickstarter, that's something that may be a good point to bring up, because towards the end of this, China went up probably close to $8,000 just on shipping. So it's kind of put me at a point to where I can't really buy a lot of extra copies. So there's not going to be a lot floating around. I think I may have, last I checked, I want to think that I ordered 100 or 150 extra of the standard edition, and then maybe another 50 to 75 of the limited. Joseph Goodman, for those of you that might not know, with Goodman Games, he ordered around the same, I think. So there will be some floating around, but for about another week now, you can still pre-order the book to make sure that you get a copy. I probably will stop doing that in about another 7 to 10 days, though. One of the things that when you actually have books printed is you have to figure in overages. So there's like a 5% overage. They may send me 5% less or 5% more than I ordered. And then you've got to factor in the fact that there may be some lost or damaged books. So I've got to stop selling them, basically getting close, because I need to make sure everybody that has backed has their book. So you can email me directly if you would like to get a copy. You can still order. They still trickle in. I get about 2 a week saying, hey, is it too late? So I'll help you as best I can, and I can give you my email at the end of the show. But if you definitely want a copy of this book, I would probably pre-order, and I'm not trying to sell the book. I promise you I'm not. I just don't think there's going to be a lot floating around once they're out in the wild. No. And if people like it, they may want to buy it, and then they may become obsolete pretty quick. We'll have to go to a second printing.
Absolutely. Cool. So, chat is also asking how heavy the book is.
Well, let's just say that you could probably, if I hit you hard enough with this, you might wake up and you might not. It is just under 7 pounds. It's 900 pages, and I've had some questions. Once I did show the book off, when you show this off, they're like, the spine's not going to hold and stuff. But I went through a printer that Joseph uses, and one of the things that I was adamant on was this book's got to be sturdy. It's got to hold together. And they've used a process with a spine. It's kind of new. And so they're telling me that you could probably throw it against a wall a couple dozen times and you'll be okay with it. So I'm hoping for the best with that.
But just to reiterate to everyone out there, the wall won't be okay. So
Yeah, I think we actually put it as a weapon in the book. So there is a stat for I think it's a D7, maybe it's a D5 that it would do.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about here, just before we wrap up the show, before we end things here, you're doing a giveaway coming up pretty soon. That's gonna benefit a cat rescue, if I'm not mistaken. So you've already mentioned that you're a cat person. I'm a cat person. James here is a cat person. Lots of cat people here. So tell us a little bit about kind of your experience with cats, why you love them so much, and tell us about the little guy that you've got now.
I'll try to make that a short story. If any of you know me, you probably know I've had a cat, Sadie, since she was a little kitten, and she passed away last year, and it was extremely hard for me to get through that. And that was August of last year, and I did not want another one, and that was just me being selfish, but I had no intentions of it. And I'm a firefighter by trade by day, and this particular day, I was supposed to bring breakfast, and I was telling Ryan, I brought breakfast, had it in the fridge. I couldn't find it anywhere. 2 cans of biscuits, how do you lose that in your fridge? But it was just kind of weird. I went on to work, and at the fire department, we trade off. We drive for a month, then we ride for a month, and it was not my month to drive. The driver was actually out sick, so I ended up having to drive. So here we are, going to buy breakfast that I should have already bought, or I did buy but couldn't find. And I'm driving the rig, and on the way back from the grocery store, I saw something that it looked like a gray tumbleweed. It was just blowing across the road, and I don't even know why it caught my eye, because you're in the engine, you're up off the road, and you're trying to watch cars. But as we drove by, it rolled and it came to a stop, and it was a kitten. And of course, I freaked out. The guys that were riding with me had no idea. So when I threw the lights on the engine and did a hard left to turn around, they probably soiled their panties a little bit. I don't know, but I just knew. I knew when I got, because there was a bus behind us and it's a busy road, and I just knew it was going to be squished. And got the engine turned around and got out and ran over there, and there he was fussing at me. And he is a spitting image of my cat that died, like when she was a kitten. So all these things kind of, and what I think happened, his toe pads were a little scorched. So I think that with the cold, he was in an engine well, and I guess when the car just hit the turn, he rolled out. And how he didn't die, I don't know, but either somebody threw him out of the car or he fell out of the engine well. So all those factors, I was kind of like, well, this is maybe the powers that be. You're telling me, I need another one. So he is a complete jackass. Just, his name's Jesco, and he is named after Jesco White. If you don't know who Jesco White is, he is probably the original Hellbilly. You can find him on YouTube. But to get back to what you're saying about the charities, for several years now, I've tried to collect games and things and do like a raffle. If you put $1 in, you get a ticket basically in the raffle. And I've done that for the last several years for local no-kill shelters. Some are dog and cat, but mostly cats. And this year, I thought, since I've got 2 copies of the Weird Frontiers game, that it would be kind of cool to raffle these off. So you could actually get a copy of these before they come out, and I'm going to throw in some dice bags and things like that. So that's probably going to go public in the next 7 days and go for a couple of weeks. But I'll make sure and let folks know on social media so they don't miss out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We love our cats here on Rollin Bones.
The coolest thing about DCC, most DCC people are cat people, and I think that's so awesome.
Mm-hmm. We all have our familiars. But one of my cats, Nora, actually came in not too terribly long ago. She doesn't like to get on camera, but while I'm sitting here doing the show, she'll put her little paws on my leg and just kind of look up and be like, pet. And so I'll pet her on top of the head until she decides she doesn't want to climb up.
Yeah, they're awesome, man. I love cats.
And then Ronan, if Ronan comes in, he'll jump up on my desk and you'll see a tail go across the camera. That has happened on I believe that happened on an episode of Deadlands the Hellgate trilogy where Ronan came in and just walked across the camera. So he's around. He's here somewhere and one of these days he'll be back on Rollin Bones.
Well, I know that both you guys were telling me your stories with your cat, so you're definitely my kind of people just from the stories you're telling me about these cool cats you've got now that had some challenging circumstances early on.
Absolutely. So, where can people find you and find information about Weird Frontiers? And also, what cons are you planning on hitting up in 2022?
Well, you can actually purchase the PDF if you want to on DriveThruRPG. It is available. I don't want to go POD yet because I'm still kind of trying to figure out if their standard printing method is going to be able to handle a book that size. We may end up having to go into 2 volumes with it. And I also don't want to make it available to folks who didn't back the Kickstarter. You know, I think it's only fair to get those folks the books before we make them for sale. But the PDF is for sale. The adventures will start dropping pretty soon. Um, we've got 4. I got the Goodman's approval on the 4th adventure today, and I'm waiting on the maps for the 5th. So those will be out soon. I probably will release those for sale just to kind of help with that overage I was telling you about with the shipping. But you can still, like I said, you can get the PDF. The book itself, as soon as I get things fulfilled, I'll put what I've got left for sale, and Joseph will have some as well on his website. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, social media wise, where can
Oh,
people find you?
the best way is Facebook. I'm not a big fan of Facebook. Twitter's got too many hashtags for me, guys. I'm too old. I can't handle that one. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Actually, I will say this: if you like, Weird West themed groups, the Weird Frontiers group is really cool. I'm very proud of it simply because it stays active, and it's not just Weird Frontiers. If you're a Deadlands guy, I guarantee you there will be posts there that you'll appreciate and maybe get some brain fuel for your own things with whatever game it is that you're playing. So, again, I am on MeWe and I'm trying really hard to get back to these things because it's just there's so many things going on. It's just me. It's me and Gilbert Isla who's doing the layout, and he's been the editor. So it's hard and doing that, and I guess working a full-time job, paying attention to all these things you need to when you've got a book coming out. But you can also email me, and we can make that available. But it's weirdfrontiersrpg at Gmail. That's weirdfrontiersrpg at Gmail. And I typically get back within 24 to 48. If you reach out to me by some form or another and I don't respond, it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's probably that I just haven't checked it. So just stay on me and I will get you.
Gotcha. Absolutely. And which platform is the best place to go if people want to see pictures of Jesco?
Facebook, definitely Facebook. Feel free to friend me on there. I'd love to chat with you and share things like that. But yeah, he has made his official appearance on Facebook a few months ago, and like I was telling you guys earlier, he's a complete jackass. You get that one kid. You always hear about that one kid you got that's perfect. Well, my first cat was just perfect, and this guy, his spirit animal is a great white shark. He runs around with his mouth wide open.
Gotcha. And just to answer the question in chat here, my cat Ronan is kinda named after Frank Miller's Ronin. Um, it's actually Ronan with an A instead of an I, because my wife vetoed Ronan with an I. So,
Well, you got to go with a wife there.
yep. So,
And
so the answer to that question is sort of.
you've got good taste in comics too. See, I like doing shows when I know I could probably just hang out with you guys, sit at the table, and shoot the breeze for several hours on just cool stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd love me some some Frank Miller. Sin City is a favorite of Sin City is one of my favorite movies of all time. Uh, Tied for first with Tombstone. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. It's hard to beat that one. And I think I missed one of your questions as far as the cons. I'm definitely attending North Texas. I'm going to try and do Gen Con and Gamehole. I would like to do some other cons as well. I know that there's Con on the Cobb, Total Con, even PAX. I mean, I'm kind of looking at all these, and with things going the way they are right now, with the COVID cooties floating around, I guess a lot of that's going to kind of factor in where I end up being this time of year. But I'm definitely going to North Texas and Long Con and Gamehole Con. I'm going to try and make Gen Con if I can.
absolutely, absolutely. And just to address some of the chatter here around Ronan's name, I will accept Ronan the Destroyer because you guys know how I feel about Conan, and the fact that Ronan routinely tries to jump up on my miniature shelf here and knock things over. He is Ronan the Destroyer.
Yeah,
And
I'm already like trying to figure out a way to protect my miniatures. So I'm like got acrylic boxes to sit over things so the jackass doesn't knock them over.
mhm. And then the James, the main character, Aragon's brother in the Aragon series is Roran, not Ronan. So that's where
Wah, wah, wah.
uh, it's all right though. You're just like off by a letter. So yeah, guys, that's gonna do it for tonight's Rollin Bones. David, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great time. I am, I'm glad that we were finally able to make this work. And just to let everyone know, all of you DCC fans out here who tuned in tonight, you're gonna want to tune in next week because we got Harley Stroh coming on, and that's gonna be a fantastic show. I am really looking forward to talking to Harley, especially now that DCC 100 is blowing up the way that it has, and that campaign has been uh, amazingly successful. So, uh, everyone who loves DCC, definitely tune in next week because Harley's going to be on. So until then, guys, remember, subscribe here on twitch.tv/Valor Studios. We're here every Monday night at 8 p.m. Definitely join the Valor Studios Discord. Follow us on Twitter, and just share the YouTube link when it comes out on Friday with anyone who loves Weird West games or loves Dungeon Crawl Classics and wasn't able to join us tonight. But we definitely appreciate your support. We're glad that you guys are here, and we hope you'll stick with us for next week with Harley. But until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I am so glad that you guys rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and us at Valor Studios, and we'll see you next time.